She had no birth certificate, no driver's license, no social security number that anyone could verify. The worn manila folder that was supposed to hold her identity contained nothing but a single piece of paper, a faded handwritten note from a woman in a village that no longer existed on any modern map. When she walked into the Naval Special Warfare Command Center in Coronado, California, the receptionist almost turned her away. But then something strange happened. The old woman stood quietly by the metal detector. She wore a simple blue dress, threadbare at the cuffs, and a pair of scuffed black shoes. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly. She did not speak English well, and her accent was a thick mix of languages that sounded like broken Russian and something else, maybe Mongolian, maybe Turkish. The young officer at the front desk asked for her ID 3 times. Each time, she just smiled gently and pointed to her chest, saying one word, Anna. Commander Reyes was called down to handle the situation. He was a large man, a veteran of 2 wars, and he had seen all kinds of people trying to get into the base. Reporters, activists, lost tourists. He expected to handle this quickly. But when he stepped into the lobby, he froze. The woman had not moved. She was not looking at him. She was looking past him, down the long hallway where the black and white photographs of the original Navy SEAL teams hung on the wall. She walked forward slowly, and Commander Reyes did not stop her. Neither did the 2 armed guards. Something about her presence made stopping her feel wrong. She stopped in front of a photograph from 1962. It showed a group of 12 men in dark wetsuits standing on a beach in Vietnam. They looked young, muscular, confident. The woman reached out and touched the glass with her fingertips. She pointed to a man in the back row, a tall, lean man with a sharp jaw and kind eyes. "My son," she whispered. That was how it began. The man in the photograph was Senior Chief Petty Officer Mikhail Volkov. According to official records, Mikhail was an orphan. He had joined the U.S. Navy in 1959, listed his place of birth as unknown, and had no known relatives. He was one of the first Soviet defectors ever recruited into the fledgling SEAL teams because he spoke perfect Russian and knew the inner workings of Soviet submarines. He was a legend. The stories about him were wild. He had once swum 12 miles through shark-infested waters to plant listening devices on a Russian naval base. He had jumped from an airplane without a parachute into a jungle canopy. He had died in 1968, officially listed as Kia in the Mekong Delta. His body never recovered for 50 years. That was the story. No family, no past. Just a ghost. The woman did not have any papers to prove she was his mother. She did not have a passport to show how she had entered the country. She did not have any money, any luggage, any identification. When the base lawyer asked her where she had come from, she simply said, "The mountains." When he asked which mountains, she smiled and said, "The cold ones." They almost arrested her. But then an odd thing happened. Every active duty SEAL who walked past that hallway that morning stopped. They did not know why. They just stopped walking, straightened their backs, and waited. Some of them later said they felt a sudden urge to be quiet, as if they were in a church. One young lieutenant, fresh out of Body S training, described it like this: "It felt like a general had walked into the room. But she wasn't a general. She was just an old lady in a blue dress. And yet my body just snapped to attention. I couldn't help it." Commander Reyes decided to do something unusual. Instead of calling security, he called the Naval History and Heritage Command. He asked them to pull everything they had on Mikhail Volkov. It took 3 hours. When the file finally arrived, it was shockingly thin. No birth records, no school records, no medical history. Just military service records and a single handwritten letter found in Mikhail's locker after his death, addressed to Mama, with no return address. The letter was written in Russian. The base translator read it aloud in the conference room. The old woman sat in a metal chair, her hands folded in her lap, listening. "My dearest Mama," the letter read, "I am writing this by the light of a candle in a place I cannot name. The water is warm here, but my heart is cold without you. I remember the winter you taught me to read by the fire, using charcoal on flat stones. I remember the night the soldiers came and took Papa away. You hid me in the bread oven for 2 days. I remember the taste of the flour dust in the dark. I promised you that day I would become strong enough to protect you. I have tried. I am sorry I cannot tell you where I am or what I do. If you receive this letter, know that I think of you every time I go into the water. Your son, Misha, the translator's voice cracked. Commander Reyes looked at the old woman. She was not crying. Her eyes were dry and bright, and she was nodding slowly, as if she had always known what the letter said. She had never received it, of course. The letter had never been mailed. It was found folded into a tiny square inside Mikhail's boot. The base historian, a man named Dr. Ellison, spent the next week trying to verify the woman's identity. He contacted archives in Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and even China. He found nothing. No village matched the description she gave. No census records listed a woman of her age with a son named Mikhail. It was as if she had been erased from history. But Dr. Ellison noticed something interesting. Every time he asked her a question about the 1940s or 1950s, she answered with perfect clarity. She described a village in the Carpathian Mountains that had been wiped out by a landslide in 1953. She named neighbors, described their faces, their voices, the way they laughed. She described the taste of the mushrooms they picked in the fall and the way the snow sounded when it fell on the roof of their tiny wooden house. She was not lying. Dr. Ellison was certain of that. But she also had no way to prove any of it. The landslide that destroyed her village had also destroyed the church where her baptism was recorded. The war had destroyed the government offices where her marriage and her son's birth might have been registered. Her identity existed only in her memory and in the memory of a dead man. The SEAL community did not know what to do with her. She had no legal status. She could not work, could not receive benefits, could not even rent a room. But she also could not be put on a plane and sent back to a country that no longer recognized her. So, unofficially, the men took care of her. A retired SEAL captain let her stay in his guest house. Two active duty operators paid for her groceries. A Navy chaplain visited her every Sunday to talk. No one asked for her papers anymore. They just called her Mama Volkov, but the strangest part of the story had not yet happened. It came 3 weeks later, during a change of command ceremony on the base parade ground. Hundreds of SEALs, past and present, were assembled in formation. The old woman was sitting on a folding chair in the back, next to the wives and children. No one had told her to come. She just appeared, wearing the same blue dress. Halfway through the ceremony, a helicopter flew low over the base. Most people ignored it. But the old woman stood up. She turned her face toward the sound of the rotors, and for the first time, her calm expression broke. Her lips trembled. She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small, worn piece of gray fabric. It looked like a piece of a uniform. She pressed it to her lips. Later, someone asked her what had happened. She said, "Helicopter sound same as boat sound from 1968. When they told me Misha died, they said he was in water. They said he went down fighting. But I never believed. I always thought he was still flying, still coming home." Commander Reyes, who had been standing nearby, heard this. He walked over to her, knelt down, and took her hand. He did not say anything. He just held it. A two-star admiral saw this and later wrote in his private journal, "I have watched men jump out of airplanes and swim through fire. I have never seen courage like that old woman's courage. She survived a war, a landslide, the loss of her village, the loss of her son, and 50 years of silence. And she never once asked for help. She just walked into a military base with nothing but a memory and expected us to remember her boy. That is the kind of love that makes a man want to be worthy of it." The ceremony continued. The flags were passed, the speeches were made, and the admiral took command. But no one who was there forgot the image of the old woman standing alone in the back, facing the helicopter, holding a scrap of fabric to her lips. No one forgot the way every SEAL in that formation had turned slightly, just slightly, to keep an eye on her. No one forgot the silence that fell when she stood up. She had no records. She had no identity. But she had raised a boy who became a warrior. And in that world, that was enough. The question of what to do with Mama Volkov did not go away. For 3 months, she lived in the guest house, and every day, a different SEAL or former SEAL would visit her. They brought her food, warm blankets, and small gifts. One man brought her a jar of homemade pickles because he had heard that Eastern Europeans like pickles. She ate one, smiled, and said in her broken English, "Too much vinegar." But good heart, the man, a 22-year-old who had just completed his first deployment, later said that her approval meant more to him than any medal, but the Navy's legal department was uncomfortable. They sent letters. They made phone calls. They wanted the old woman gone. She was a security risk, they said. She had no documentation. She could be anyone. A spy, a fugitive, a con artist. Commander Reyes fought them for weeks, but eventually, he was told in no uncertain terms, either she leaves voluntarily, or she will be removed and handed over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Reyes drove to the guest house to tell her the news. He found her sitting on the back porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl. The sun was setting over San Diego Bay, and the water was gold and pink. He sat down next to her and explained the situation as gently as he could. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she put down a pea pod and looked at him. "I understand," she said. "I am Ghost. Ghosts cannot stay in one place. They must wander." She did not seem angry or sad. She seemed peaceful, as if she had always known this moment would come. Reyes asked her where she wanted to go. She shrugged. "The mountains," she said again. "The cold ones." But before she could leave, something happened that changed everything. A former SEAL named Tom McGraw, who had retired 20 years earlier and now ran a small museum dedicated to the history of naval special warfare, came to visit her. McGraw was a legend in his own right. He had served in Vietnam, Grenada, and the First Gulf War. He was old now, with a white beard and a limp, but his eyes were sharp. He sat with Mama Volkov for 3 hours, asking her questions about Mikhail. She told him everything. How Mikhail was born during a snowstorm in January 1940, how his father was killed by Soviet secret police in 1944 because he had been seen talking to a Hungarian refugee, how she had hidden Mikhail in the bread oven for 2 days while the soldiers searched the house, how they had fled the village when Mikhail was 7, walking for 3 weeks through the mountains, eating only berries and tree bark, how they had crossed into Romania, then Turkey, then somehow, miraculously, Italy. How Mikhail had been adopted by an American missionary family when he was 12 because she could no longer care for him. How she had watched him board a ship in Naples, waving goodbye with a red scarf, and how she had never seen him again. McGraw listened to all of this, and then asked the question no one else had thought to ask. "Why did you never try to find him before now?" The old woman was quiet for a long time. Then she reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed and brittle. She handed it to McGraw. He opened it carefully. It was a telegram, dated October 15, 1968. It was addressed to a woman named Anna Volkov in a refugee camp in Trieste, Italy. It read, "Regret to inform you that your son, Senior Chief Petty Officer Mikhail Volkov, U.S. Navy, was killed in action on October 12, 1968. His body is not recoverable. Signed, the Secretary of the Navy." McGraw looked up at her. "You had this all along." "I had it," she said. "I knew he was dead. But a mother always hopes. I hoped for 50 years. Then one day, I saw a photograph in a magazine. It was a picture of Navy men in a boat. Behind them was a flag. On the flag was written SEAL Team 1, the name of my son's team. I thought, if they still have his team, maybe they still remember him. Maybe they will let me see where he lived." She had saved money for 20 years. She had worked as a cleaner, a cook, a nanny. She had never learned to drive, never owned a phone, never had a bank account. She had simply saved cash in a tin box under her bed. When she had enough, she bought a plane ticket from Rome to New York. She did not have a passport, so she had hidden in the cargo hold of a freight ship for 11 days. She had walked from New York to California. It had taken her 9 months. McGraw did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did both. He took her story to the Admiral. The Admiral, a man named Vice Admiral Harris, was known for being tough and unemotional. He read McGrath's report, then read it again. Then he called the Navy's top lawyer and said for words, "Fix this problem now." The lawyers worked for 2 weeks. They could not give Mama Volkov citizenship. They could not give her a social security number or a driver's license. But they found a loophole. Under an obscure regulation dating back to World War II, a surviving parent of a service member killed in action could be granted humanitarian parole status, allowing her to remain in the country indefinitely. It was not citizenship, but it was enough. She would not be sent away. When Commander Reyes gave her the news, she nodded and said, "Thank you." Then she asked if she could see the ocean. He drove her to a beach in Coronado. She took off her shoes, walked into the water up to her knees, and stood there for a long time, looking out at the horizon. When she came back to the car, Her dress was wet, and she was smiling. Misha loved the water, she said. When he was little, he would try to swim in the river even when it was frozen. I would yell at him, but he never stopped. He said the water was the only place he felt free. From that day on, Mama Volkov became a regular presence on the base. She was given a small apartment in a building reserved for retired officers. She did not cook fancy meals or give speeches. She simply sat on a bench outside the SEAL training compound, knitting socks. The young men, the ones going through BUD-AS training, would run past her, and she would nod at them. Some of them started slowing down, just to hear her say, "Good boy. Run straight. Run strong." Instructors noticed that the trainees who stopped to talk to her performed better in the pool. Not because she gave them advice she didn't, but because she reminded them of someone. A grandmother, a mother, a reason to survive the cold, the exhaustion, the fear. She died 3 years later, in her sleep, at the age of 91. The cause was listed as heart failure. But the SEALs who knew her said her heart had never failed. It had kept beating through wars, famines, landslides, and 50 years of silence. It had walked from New York to California. It had hidden in the cargo hold of a ship. It had stood in the Pacific Ocean and remembered a little boy who loved the frozen river. Her funeral was held on the beach at Coronado. Hundreds of SEALs attended, from active duty to retired. They wore their uniforms. They stood in formation. There was no casket because she had asked to be cremated. But there was an empty chair facing the ocean, and on the chair was placed her blue dress, her scuffed black shoes, and a pair of half-finished knitted socks. The chaplain spoke for 5 minutes. He talked about love, about sacrifice, about the invisible threads that connect mothers and sons across time and distance. Then Commander Ray stepped forward. He read the same letter that had been found in Mikhail's boot 55 years earlier. He read it in Russian, then in English. When he finished, he folded the paper, placed it on the chair, and saluted. Every SEAL on that beach saluted as well. They saluted a woman who had no records, no identity, no proof that she had ever existed except in the hearts of the men she had touched. They saluted the mother of a ghost. And then, one by one, they walked into the water, up to their knees, and stood there, looking out at the horizon. They did not say a word. They did not need to. The ocean said it all.